Hello everybody and welcome to the Helen Winder Show. My name is Helen Winder and my guest today is Mark Baker, who is an international speaker and author. Hello Mark, thanks for joining me.
Hi Helen, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And yourself?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good. Well, listen, tell our listeners who you are, where you come from and what it is that you do.
My name is Mark Baker, as you know. I'm a professional speaker, and I basically talk about limiting beliefs and how to overcome them for individuals and corporations. A lot of sales companies and organizations I also work for.
How did you get into this? So, what's your journey been?
Well, I had a bit of strange introduction to speaking. It wasn't something I actually ever planned to do. I'd been through a lifetime of physical and mental abuse by my late father, which lasted until my late teens, until my parents got divorced on my 18th birthday. I was desperately lonely at the time, and then I, fell in love with a girl. I didn't really fall in love. I was just needed somebody. And then she wasn't who I thought she was, and she actually went to prison for 6 years. And then this was all in the year that my parents got divorced. It was just basically too much for an 18-year-old boy, which, you think you're a man at 18, but, when you look back, I was 50 last Thursday, so 18 really is just a boy. And then I got into the life insurance industry, which is a rejection-based industry, which was just the natural follow-on.
It's strange, isn't it, how that happens?
Oh, absolutely. Which it was a very tough business, and I realized what the life insurance did for me, what the life insurance business did, was actually made me realize what a flawed individual that I was, and all the areas that I was lacking in. So it was kind of exactly what I needed at the time.
Okay, so then that led onto what? How did you get into, into what you're doing today? Because I believe, were you involved at the beginning with the PSA?
The Professional Speakers Association, yes, I was a founder member of the association, which I was very proud to be. It's a wonderful association where aspiring speakers, especially from the Professional Speakers Association, is UK-based, but it's part of the National Speakers Association, which is more of a global organisation. Well, how I got in, because of that, really, I was really trying to reinvent myself. I had so much ambition as a young man, but whatever I seemed to do, I couldn't seem to make it work. So I got to working on myself. I bought thousands of books, literally audio tapes as they were at the time, didn't have CDs 20 years ago. And I basically discovered that, I was the poster boy for limiting beliefs. So I made limiting beliefs a study of mine. It became my life's work, and I actually found my calling because of it.
Interesting, isn't it, how these things do come about? It's and I think a lot of us have something that does get in the way. Something stops us from growing and moving forward. And once we realise what it is, wow, you can really, well, propel.
Well, that's the absolute truth, Helen, because what I did was I managed to reinvent myself after all that I'd learned. But the interesting thing was that at the time, when you're going through these kind of things in your life, you think you're the only one and everybody else is okay. But the more I learned and the more I studied, I realized that everybody has these limiting beliefs to one degree or another. And another discovery that I made was that they absolutely apply to everything. They apply to everything we do. They apply. We have them in regard to what kind of parent we are, what kind of son or daughter we are, what kind of salesperson, business person, entrepreneur. They apply to everything, and they set the limits of our lives and what we're able to achieve because of them.
Yeah, and the trouble is we're not aware of them until it gets to that point.
Well, most people never discover them because they operate at a subconscious level.
Yes.
And we actually express them by avoidance. So somebody might say to you, for example, Helen, do you fancy going for something simple like an Indian meal? And you'll just decline the offer. And you'll say, no, I'm not really into Indian food. But if somebody was to maybe probe that a little further and say, well, have you ever tried it? And you'd say, well, no, I haven't ever tried it. But that's just a really simple example. But that could be anything. Why don't you set up your own business? Or I'm not really a business person. But where does that come from? It all comes from somewhere. But it's at a subconscious level. So unless we really question these things and delve deep down into the reasons why, we just never know. And for most people, they just go through life being limited, never realizing that they're limited.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, you can hear it when you're aware of it. And how to recognize it. I suppose you quite often hear it in others when they're speaking, and you think, oh, if you could just sort of step outside and look in.
Well, you can actually tell a lot by what people's limiting beliefs are just by their language and how they refer to things. And it's quite interesting because most of our beliefs are initially formed during what we call the imprint period, which is from birth to 7 years old.
Mm.
And as you know, is one of the main sources of limiting beliefs is from our parents or authority figures, such as teachers. And the reason why we're so well programmed between that age is because between the age of 0 and 7, you don't really question anything.
Yeah.
So, anything your dad or your mum says to you or a teacher says to you, up until that sort of age or maybe a little bit older, I mean, basically God has spoken. If your dad says something is true, you believe it to be true just because your father told you.
Yeah.
And this is how they're formed.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny as you're speaking and you're sort of describing things. I myself, I'm already linking little things back to when I was younger. It's quite interesting, isn't it? How it starts to open the mind up a little bit. So, what is it you do now in your business? I know you're a speaker, you're an author. So how do you deliver what your thing around limiting beliefs and help others?
Well, I mean, I became totally aware that there was an absolute need for this kind of information and what I do. And I was so fortunate that this was actually what I needed because I believe it's probably the most powerful subject in the world as far as personal development is concerned. Because you get companies that they employ sales trainers to increase the sales of their staff, but that's not really the problem because it doesn't matter what you know, it's whether you can apply it or not. And whether you apply it or not is based upon whether you think you can. That's not positive thinking, it's way beyond positive thinking. It's actually being able to go back and unravel the reasons why you have these limits on your potential, question them, find out whether they're valid, and then create more empowering new beliefs. And I've seen people's careers literally be transformed, not quite in front of your eyes, but not over a very long period of time either, where they're just able to drastically improve because they're able to remove these, what literally are glass ceilings in their lives.
Do you work with individuals or do you work with a team? How does that work when you're in a bigger environment? Because obviously they work quite differently to smaller companies.
Well, I mean, there's not much difference in as much that these ideas are generic.
Mm-hmm.
And I say ideas, but they're not really ideas. They're just facts of the mind. This is how your mind works. So, I mean, they apply to everybody. Everybody has them. They might apply to people in different degrees. In fact, they do apply to people in different degrees. I mean, if you had a really prosperous father who thought and ingrained in you success, then it's easier for you. You'll go forward and you'll do much better.
Yeah.
However, if you come from a family where the focus is on lack and there's never enough, then you grow up with this belief that there just isn't enough to go around, which is an interesting thing, really, because one of the subjects that I cover, which is just really a fun area, but everybody relates to it, is limiting beliefs about money. Now, if I shout that to the audience, there's never enough to, and they go around. It takes money to make money, because they all have heard these things all of their lives, and these things are ingrained into them, so they just accept them as the truth. But the truth is that it's not true at all.
Very interesting, isn't it? I'm fascinated now. I'm sure my listeners will be wanting to know an awful lot more. So, how do you engage with people? Do you sort of run it as a workshop, or is it sort of a one-to-one basis?
I do it in multiple formats, Helen. It can be done in one-to-one coaching. It can be done in teams. Or it can be done through, the thing I'm most busy with is keynote speeches. The keynote speeches are really nothing more than an awareness creation tool, because these are things that most people have never, ever come across before in their lives. They may have touched on it briefly, but, for example, one of the common things somebody might say to you, or somebody said to you at some time in your life, or you've most definitely said it to your children, as I know you have young boys, you might say, oh, just believe in yourself. But if you stop and think about that, how do you believe in yourself? Well, if I just do this and I just do that, I'll believe in myself. But it's not really that simple. There's actually a structure and a process to it. You literally have to go back and unravel the reasons why you believe what you do and question them and question their validity. It may have been valid once. It may have been useful to you at one stage, but is that belief still useful to you now? And for most part, they're not useful to you now, holding you back, and they're extremely outdated beliefs, and they need to be changed.
Yeah, and the trouble is we've evolved, but, well, technology and things around us have evolved, but actually our mind hasn't quite caught up yet, has it?
No, it hasn't really caught up at all, but there's a very good reason for that, and that's because we haven't had a minute's teaching on this kind of information in our entire lives. We go through the entire education system without doing 1 minute's work on the mind, or how the mind works, or how to think.
Mm.
And it throws up, I mean, one way you'll come across, people say to you, I mean, if you tell somebody something of interest or something fascinating, they might say, if they don't believe it, they'll say, well, I'll believe it when I see it. How many times have you heard that?
Oh, gosh,
Yeah,
loads.
Well, we hear it all the time, we hear it every day, but what I'd say to you is people actually have it backwards. You see, we don't believe things when we see them, we believe them in advance, then we see them. We have to have the belief first.
It is interesting. I mean, I'm now, as you're talking, I'm now looking at situations that have happened, both at home and in business, and can see where it starts to link into what you're saying.
No, absolutely. Like I said, it's generic and it applies to everybody, so none of us are immune from this. But I mean, it's how our mind works that we need to understand. And we haven't got that much time today. We've only got a bit of limited time.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that I can share with you which will emphasize the point.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things is that we're actually subjected to 2 million bits of information per second via our 5 senses.
Mm-hmm.
But we can only process 134 bits of information per second. Now, there's a massive gap there, Helen, 2 million to 134 bits. So how does your brain or your mind actually decide on which of those 2 million bits to actually focus on, bearing in mind you can only take in 134? Well, what it does is that the bits you focus on, the bits you see are what you focus on and what you think about and what you have intense feelings about.
Mm-hmm.
Basically what's important to you at any one time, or what's dominating your mind. Now, you've been pregnant a couple of times. You've got 2 young boys.
Yeah.
Now, when you got pregnant, did you see pregnant women everywhere?
Oh, yes.
Everywhere, all of a sudden. You didn't see them before you got pregnant, but once you got pregnant or decided to have a baby, you saw pregnant women all over the place.
Yeah.
Now, my question to you is this. Were those pregnant women there before you got pregnant or before you decided to have a family?
They will have been there.
Not the same pregnant women, obviously, but
No.
they were always pregnant women.
No, well, they would
you
have
didn't
been
notice them.
No.
You probably thought at the time, oh, there must be a bit of a pregnancy boom on at the moment. But the truth was the pregnancy rate has never really changed. The birth rate's never really changed. There's always pretty much been the same amount of babies being born. So what it was you just decided that was important to you. So out of those 2 million bits of information, that information was floating out there beforehand. Once it becomes important to you, you notice it wherever you go. It may have happened for other people. I mean, for men that have obviously never been pregnant, they may have seen a car, bought a new car, and all of a sudden, this may have happened to you as well, Helen. Have you ever bought a car and all of a sudden you see them everywhere you look?
Yeah, absolutely. And I had one which was quite unusual because I love cars, and it was top of the range sports version, and I had absolutely everything extra put on it. And lo and behold, somebody drives past, exactly the same colour, exactly the same side bars and the bull bars and the extra lights that were on there. And I'm thinking, how can they have exactly the same? And the number plate was just one character different.
I know, it's funny. And the funny thing is you wouldn't have noticed that before you bought that car.
No.
It would have gone by you. But you would just see them all over the place. But that's how our mind works. But you see, if you don't know that, then you're going to use your mind in a haphazard way, sometimes successfully, mostly unsuccessfully, because if you're not aware of the process and how it works, it'll be a very hit or miss scenario. But when you understand how powerful focus is and how powerful this is when you, in this context, then you can actually choose what to focus on, and you can actually be aware of what you're thinking about and what you're focusing on. And if you don't focus on something specific and understand how it works, then you'll find yourself worrying. I mean, one thing, well, this is a biblical quote, is that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Because that's what they're thinking about. That's what they focus on.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, we could have quite a series of shows here, couldn't we?
Yeah, well, we could. I mean, it's not something we can cover over a short space of time, but
No.
I could talk for days on this subject. But it's absolutely fascinating.
It
There's
is.
various functions of mind which all come into play, and it's so simple because it's just a way of thinking. And once you change and adapt this way of thinking, your whole life will change. I've done it in my own life. I've seen it happen so often and so quickly in other people's lives that it's just literally mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's just literally like that light bulb that we need to light for it, and just flick the switch, and once it starts, then the whole chain will happen.
No, absolutely. And it's simple. It's not complex. People try and make it more complicated than what it is. But it's really just a way of thinking, and it's just a way of controlling your thought. Some people say, oh, you know, I understand that's positive thinking. But it's not really positive thinking. It's way, way beyond that.
Yeah.
I actually, fortunately, I mean, like I said to you before, as you already know, I had a life-challenging situation a couple of years ago. I had cancer, and it was thankfully, I mean, this information actually changed my life because I had the diagnosis. I had the shock diagnosis, and it's exactly like you see in the films where the doctor who's giving the news is sort of talking in slow motion and garble, and that's you going into shock. But what I didn't realize it straight away, but all of a sudden I started noticing life insurance adverts, noticing everything about death. I started noticing everything about cancer. I started noticing shoe sales or suit sales in town because in my mind I was thinking, is it worth spending money on a pair of shoes or an expensive pair of shoes? So I was looking for sales. And then I caught myself and I thought, I teach this stuff. Look what I'm doing. I'm actually focusing on, and I was on a downward spiral. But because I taught it, I was actually able to be aware of how I was thinking. I was actually able to turn it all around. And when I was having chemotherapy in Southampton, I remember just chatting to a young girl, because when you're having chemotherapy, it's not in a private room, it's in a chemo ward. There might be 12 or 20 of you on lazy boy chairs with your intravenous chemotherapy being inserted. And you'll have people with you from 5 years old to 50 to 90 years old. I remember chatting to this young girl next to me, and I said, she was a teenager, and I said, how are you going to beat this? And there was a woman, a nurse that was listening to me, talking to her. And she didn't say anything, but she went off and spoke to everybody that was having chemotherapy, and one by one, they picked up their drips and they came and sat around my bed, and I started talking. I started teaching them how to think and how this stuff works. And it was so beautiful as they got it to understand, because before, the best thing they had was positive thinking, and positive thinking doesn't do it. Thinking is no good to you whatsoever. It is, but a very small part. Positive thinking is like putting your hand over your eyes, looking out your window and saying, there are no weeds in my garden. Your hand's away and the weeds are there.
Yeah.
You've got to have the belief, but you've got to believe at a subconscious level. Now, if you ever said you're going to do something, then a little voice inside you says, no, you're not, Helen. To do that, Helen. Ever had that?
Yeah.
Well, that is a conflicting belief. You're saying, I'm going to do this, but you've got a limiting belief within you that says, no, you can't, and that's the little voice that's inside you. And when you know that you're able to beat this, and when you know you're able to be a success, it's when you've got a little small voice within you saying the same thing and confirming what you're going to do. And that is what happens when you've overcome your limiting beliefs.
It is so powerful. I mean, as you know, and my listeners will know, last year I myself had a health blip, and at the time I just went into it because obviously it was a massive change, and then I started noticing others who were being announced on the news. I think one of the hairy bikers, he had a stroke, and suddenly everybody was coming forward to say, oh yes, and so-and-so's had that, and so-and-so's had that, and you are noticing it. And I had to make a decision to almost switch off, or switch my mind away from focusing on it, because there was no way I was going to move forward with business, with home, and obviously with launching the show as well. So it's just, it's understanding how powerful it is to be able to move forward, isn't it?
Absolutely, and what you've described there is perfectly encapsulates what we've been talking about, where everything to do with your ailment and what happened to you last year comes into full. You start noticing people who have it. You start seeing people on television who are talking about it, whereas before it would have gone straight over your head because it didn't fit in with what was going on. But all of a sudden it becomes important to you, so you notice, and then you notice everything. But fortunately for you, you were able to see for yourself what was going on and able to change the way you thought and use it to your advantage. But most people just don't have that fortunate situation happen to them because they don't understand the process. Frustrating for me, because this should be taught in schools, and as long as it isn't taught in schools, the vast majority of people are going to go through life unnecessarily limited in what they're able to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we now know where to go to. Mark Baker.
Well, absolutely, absolutely.
Definitely. Now, obviously, in business, we all set out and we all have this huge image of where we want to be and who we want to be and how we want to look. Has it been a smooth road for you, or have there been lumps and bumps and roadworks, as I describe it?
I don't think there is ever a smooth road, and if it was like that, I think everybody will be doing it, and there'd be no such thing as achievement. I
Yeah.
think the only reason that we get to enjoy success is because it is difficult, and because most people give up along the way. And I think that that's the absolute truth. It's not easy. Nothing worthwhile is ever easy, and if it was, everybody would be doing it, and then it wouldn't be special.
No.
There wouldn't be anything great about it because it would just be the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'd be a bit boring if we were all doing the same thing.
No, absolutely. I mean, challenges separate the wheat from the chaff, and, it's all about, I mean, I don't know what it is, but people just expect things to be easy.
Hmm.
And they set out on a goal, and an obstacle pops up, and they see that as a stop sign. It's not a stop sign. It's just something that needs to be overcome. But they just stop. Most people, not everybody, because there's plenty of people out there achieving wonderful things, absolutely magnificent achievements, but that's not the majority. The majority of people come along to an obstacle and they quit.
Mm.
Whereas just over the other side of the hill is the glory, but most people just never make it there.
No, it's very true. I mean, I lost a business a few years ago that was, I'd built it up to be worth just over $1 million. And many people said to me, look, Helen, give up. Why don't you give up? Get a job and, just settle that way. And I thought, no, that's not me. I'm not going to give up because what happened wasn't wholly my doing. I could have influenced it slightly differently, but I've learned from that. Um, and I've kept going rather than stopping at that hurdle. And I think that's really important.
But there's an interesting point you brought up there. When people tell you, give up, Helen, go and get a job, they're not talking to you about you. They're
No.
talking to you about them. They are verbalizing their own limiting beliefs about how they couldn't do what you're trying to do, and they're encouraging you to do the same. It's
Mm.
not malicious. It's not because they want you to fail. It's just because they're just expressing to you how they see the world, and it's not that your reality. It's just their reality that they're expressing.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? So true. So, gosh, I should think everybody sat there nodding away because, it's certainly ringing a lot of bells with me, not alarm bells, but things with me that I can really relate to. So, you know, you've obviously built and grown in so many different ways, and you make such a difference to people's lives. How can we get hold of you? What's the best way of making contact so that we can also learn and grow forward?
Okay, well, one of the there's several different ways. You can either contact me through the website, which is markbakerspeaks.com, which
Mhm.
is obviously prefaced with www. Which is all one word.
Yep.
Or you can contact me directly via email, which is info@markbakerspeaks.com.
Mhm.
Or you can call on the office telephone, which is 1534-486-550.
And you're not here on the mainland, are you?
No, I'm based in Jersey in the Channel Islands. I was born here. And I love Jersey. It's an absolutely beautiful place. But I don't just work here. I work all over the world. So
Yeah.
wherever the call comes from, I go to.
Yeah, no matter where you are, it's, I mean, gosh, we can, with technology as well, we can reach so many people, can't we?
Oh, we're so fortunate these days. The internet and Google, I mean, you can get the answer to any question in a split second. I don't even know how we knew anything beforehand.
Oh gosh, you know what? I remember the day that the internet was launched and it was one website. And that's it. The
No,
good
it's a
old.
miraculous tool. Everything is within reach now.
It certainly is. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time, out of your busy schedule. Maybe we can chat again over a particular subject and have a series of shows. What do you think?
No, I'd love to. I mean, and if you'd like to do that, what we can do is break it down into segments, and we can cover one segment per time and really give people something that they can work with and go. What I've done today is really just making people aware of how this works. I mean, there's more work to do than just this. Nearly 25 years, as you can imagine, there's an awful lot to it. But I mean, the main and the most important fundamental step is awareness, and hopefully we've been successful in creating a little bit of that today.
I'm sure we have, absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much, Mark, and thank you also to my listeners. Keep tuning in, because I will have more amazing guests joining me, and you can visit the website, which is www.thehelenwindershow.com. I'll speak to you all very soon. Bye for now.